All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Best Practices for Migrating to the new HPE Aruba Central Experience. I'm Brittany Bierman, and I'm part of the HPE Aruba Central Customer Success team, and I will be your host for today's session. I'm joined today by Mark Ibanez, Senior Principal Technical Marketing Engineer, and Frank Jazz, Director of Product Management. And they will be walking us through what it takes to successfully migrate your operational workflows from Classic Central to the new Central experience. In this session, we'll start by exploring key monitoring, reporting, and troubleshooting workflows, and then move into important preparation steps like site readiness, floor plan migration, operational feature customization, and API migration. We'll also share practical recommendations for configuration migration based on different network deployment types so you can approach your transition with confidence. We'll be answering questions throughout the webinar and we'll leave time for your questions at the end. So please use the Q&A tab to ask them. With that, let's get started. Over to you, Mark.
All right, great. Thanks, Brittany. And good to be with you guys in this session. I'm happy to see close to 400 attendees right now. And so that's getting me pretty excited to go through this material. So my goal today is really to give you the guidance and the tips so that you have the best user experience when using New Central. That's really my main goal. And I'm going to go through, let me go through the agenda. Well, actually, first, we're going to have a quick poll. We want to see how many of you have actually tried using New Central at this point. We've been on a journey with New Central. We officially GA'd it at the end of last year. We just want to get a quick poll. How many of you have tried to use it so far? Brittany, how long do we have for the poll and when do we close it?
I'll give it about 20 more seconds.
Okay.
And it looks like as of right now, about 65% have tried the new central MRT features
Okay.
and
Okay.
35 have not.
Okay, that's great. That's a good statistic to know. So at least about two-thirds of you have actually already tried it. So that's really good to hear. So let me continue forward. We do have a packed agenda, so I just want to kind of take you through what the plan for this session. I'm going to spend the first 20 minutes covering slides, and I really wanted to start off of why we think will be beneficial for you as a customer to move your operational workflows into New Central. So I'll give you some highlights there. And then I'll get into the details, and nuts and bolts. I'll start off with the basics of how you would prepare your sites and floor plans and get them migrated from Classic to New Central. And then I'll talk about some key operational aspects of New Central, where I feel like we've made a huge improvement in the way we've designed and created new frameworks around alerts, reports, and RBAC. So I wanted to focus on those three specific features and how you would customize for those three features. I will actually spend most of the time doing the demo because I'd like to show you this live and walk you through everything, every single thing I talk about in the slides and show that to you in the live demo. And towards the end, for customers that are using more automation frameworks and using our APIs, we'll also talk about the API transition. I'll hand off some resources and links to documentation, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So that's the plan for this session. All right, so let's get started. So we have New Central, and we have put a lot of effort into improving the operations and visibility within New Central. We call it proactive, meaning we're here to actually help you manage your network in a more efficient way. We bubble up what's more important on the dashboard, things like the health of your sites, the health of your devices and clients, all the critical alerts. We've done a better job in bubbling them up. And we've also done a better job in giving you guidance for how to resolve these issues so that you can get to quicker resolution. The visibility, we have done a lot of improvements in terms of not just at the device level, but even at the client level with the client insights and the classification. And beyond that, even at the applications, what your clients are actually using in terms of applications, what any of the traffic flows, right? We get down into real deep visibility, right? So that's what we focused our attention on in New Central and specifically for MRT. And we're obviously on a journey to AI and to the self-driving. You've heard a lot about self-driving now with HPE networking. Aruba Central has been on that journey already. Like we introduced our Copilot, our chatbot interface just last year at the Discover conference. And we have given that access to that in most of our production clusters. Some of your customers, some of you may have already started to use that. And this gives you actually a different type of workflow where you can actually ask pretty complex questions to the Copilot, and it will actually do the analysis of the system, the troubleshooting, and so forth, and give you actually some recommendations of how to go about that. So we're getting to the point where we're on this journey. We're going to try to make things easier as we go, and the self-driving outcomes will actually become, when you guys are comfortable, will become more automated. Right now, it's always a human in the loop. You always have the last say in terms of performing any action. But we'll get to the point where we actually automate some of these workflows that you're comfortable with and really drive towards a self-driving network. All right. So this is what I'm going to focus on in this session. We really are going to spend most of the time on the MRT, so the monitoring, reporting, and troubleshooting aspects of New Central and how to get to the best user experience for that in New Central. So the first three are really around steps you can do within the UI. So we'll focus initially on the basics in terms of how would you prepare your sites so that you can actually consume the MRT workflows. The sites are actually mandatory at this point for New Central. And along with sites, you normally have floor plans with your AP locations and maps associated with that. So you want to have make sure you migrate those floor plans properly. And then we'll get into the specific operational settings. And like I said, we'll highlight the alerts, reports, and RBACs in this session. And I'll go through a little bit more as we go through the demo. And at the end, we'll take care of those of you that have been using APIs for any type of automation workflows, and we'll talk about some of the changes we've made in the API. All right, so let's go for it. Let's go through the basics. So I think many of you maybe understand this already. So when we started using Classic Central, sites were actually an optional construct. You didn't have to have sites, but what you did have to have was groups. All the devices, whether they're AP switches or gateways, had to be contained within a group, and that allowed you to configure those devices and monitor devices. The sites were actually a separate construct. You had the ability to create sites and like mainly by geographical locations or maybe buildings and things like that. You can define what those sites are in Classic. But you may have not gone fully to that level, right? So now we actually asking our customers to actually really do create those sites because they are mandatory for New Central. We centered a lot of our efforts around the site context. So we want to make sure you have properly created your sites and assigned devices to the sites. And that will get you to the best user experience for New Central. Now, the one thing we have done recently, I'd say within the last couple of months, we constantly make upgrades to our production clusters, right? Normally they're done on a monthly basis where we introduce new features. So in the last couple of months, we introduced the concept of the unmapped site. So for customers that have not actually mapped all their devices into a site, we have actually automatically placed those devices into what we call an unmapped site. If you've already had all your devices into sites, then there will be no change in what you see in the UI. All your sites are what you configured, devices are within the sites that you configured, and they stay the same. This is only to take care of those devices that were kind of like leftovers that were not assigned to sites. It's kind of like a holding place for these devices. We wanted to make sure all devices are mapped into site, so we automatically place them into this unmapped site if they were not already assigned to a site before. All right, so I just want to tell you that's the recent change over the last couple of months. The way that looks in the system, so the way that looks in the UI in New Central, if you actually look at a device and it wasn't mapped to a site before, it will get placed into this site called unmapped. And it maps over into the Classic Central too. You will see that unmapped site on the Classic side as well. And I'll show you this in the demo. All right, so that's just a little bit on the sites. The second thing I want to get to is the floor plan. So many customers like to use floor plans. They have very good aspects in terms of seeing the actual AP locations on a map, on the different floors of a building, seeing some coverage, kind of heat maps, type of visualization. These are all very useful things for our customers. And we wanted to make this a very easy process to migrate the floor plans and maps and AP placements that you had in Classic Central over to New Central. And we actually created an easy button. So this is the one thing we kind of made the effort to make this as easy a process as possible for the customers. And basically, we want to make sure all your floor plans exist in Classic Central. They should already be there before you hit this easy button. And then when you get to New Central, there will be, I'll show you this in the demo, there will be a floor plan management tile that you can get to from the global menu. And within that tile, you'll see this migrate. This is essentially that easy button that I'm talking about, step 3. And this is done for all the sites at once. So it's for their whole account, your whole organization. All the sites within your account will get migrated one by one on the floor plans. And you can go ahead and go to New Central and go to each of your sites and verify that those floor plans actually mapped over properly. So that's what I'm happy to say. It's a quite easy process. However, I want to make sure you're careful when you're using it, right? So this is just to give you some of the constraints. This is a one-time operation. You can only do this once based on the last backup data that you had in Classic Central. If you actually made any changes in Classic after the migration, then those changes after migration will not be migrated into New Central, right? So we highly recommend that all of your floor plans and everything is already all in Classic before you do this migration button, right? And if it actually happens to fail, we'll have to contact support to kind of reinitiate that process. I'm happy to say that I actually worked with one of our customers in the US where they had thousands of sites, and there was quite a lot of sites to migrate the floor plans. And we were able to get this done successfully through this floor plan migration easy button. And that included mapping the APs and so forth properly on the floor plans. The bottom part here is really a little bit about the different types of users that will be able to do this easy button, this migrate button. You have to be really an admin or a view edit role, and you have to have access to all the sites because you have to have, this is across all your sites, right? So your user has to have access to the full scope of your sites. All right. So just a little bit of notes to make sure you're careful before you press that easy button. All right, let's keep going. So now I want to kind of talk to you about some operational enhancements within New Central. And I wanted to really focus on alerts and reports in RBAC. Now for alerts and reports, I feel like we have made a step change improvement, meaning we have vastly improved the alerts in New Central, and we have vastly improved the reports in New Central. And because of that, because of the way we've made the change in the framework, the way you configure alert rules and thresholds and the way you do notifications and so forth have actually slightly changed in New Central. So for these areas, for these alerts, for example, for alerts, if you had configuration of alerts in Classic Central, they do not automatically carry forward in New Central. You'll actually have to re-enter those configurations in New Central. That's because we made the step change in the framework, right? I just wanted to give you that background. The same thing is for reports. We made a step change in reports. We introduced a lot more KPIs in the reports. And so any reports that you have set up or scheduled in Classic, they have to be redone in New Central just because the framework has changed. RBAC hasn't really changed as much. It's not a big step change. Actually, a lot of the Classic Central roles and authorization still apply in New Central. We just introduced a few more things in terms of RBAC. So RBAC is not as big of a step change, but I just want to get that highlighted because we get a lot of questions on RBAC as well. All right, so let's start with alerts. So when I say we have a step change, this is what I mean. So we created a new alerts framework. And so not only did we change the framework, we also made it more meaningful in terms of how many alerts that we can trigger on in this new framework. We actually increased that by 3x. So that's quite more comprehensive across access points, across switches, across gateways. There's a lot more alerts that are now built into the system. At the same time, we don't want to create too much noise in the system. So sometimes we have customers that have thousands, let's say, of alerts that come up in the dashboard and you don't know where to start. So we wanted to conquer that use case and reduce the alert noisiness, the fatigue that you see in alerts, and really do more correlation, build more guardrails around these alerts so that they don't like have a lot of false positives, right? These are the things that we've paid more attention to. So the alerts that do surface up are the ones that actually you do need to do work. You do need to do something about and resolve, right? On top of that, we've added more root cause analysis, actually. So this is actually, I would say never did that in Classic Central. We've added this in New Central, and we've given not just analysis, but some recommendations for how to actually resolve those particular alerts. So that's a huge value add, I believe. And for some of the alerts, we actually show some of the time series associated with that alert. These tables are just mainly for reference, right? I won't go through these line by line, but I just wanted to show you there's so much improvement we've made between Classic and New Central. Things we didn't support in Classic are now in New Central, right? So I just want to flash these for a little bit and just go through that, right? Even some of the network insights have been mapped into the alerts as well in New Central. And what we call ORCA is just a term for the orchestrated root cause analysis. So that's the root cause analysis I was talking about that we've added to the alerts. All right. So let me go over the next thing is the reports. Again, I feel like we have made a step change in terms of how many KPIs we now support in these predefined reports. We've increased the number of reports. We've added more KPIs within these reports. We still kept the customizability of these reports as well, if you wanted to fine-tune the reports to specific KPIs that you're looking for. And we've added more advanced time slicing and so forth. So again, I have a few tables here just to show you that we've made these huge improvements, right? The custom reports was actually not available in Classic. Now we were able to customize them in New Central. Handling multiple sites and multiple devices were not handled in Classic. Now you can do that in New Central, right? And better filtering, better preview, and so forth, right? These are a lot of things that we now support in New Central. Okay. Let me cover one more thing and before I get into the demo, and that's really around RBAC. So let me just skip through the table. These are just mainly for reference. Some of these things like for example, switch capacity planning, they're included in different parts of the report. So some things have been rearranged and we just changed the report name, and some of these things have been included in that report. Other parts are kind of in the process. So some reports that are available in Classic, we're still working on mapping that into New Central. So we'll see that coming up. A little bit on RBAC before I get into the demo. So RBAC, the user management and authentication and authorization, these features are actually done within GreenLake. So you can think of GreenLake as really the front end, the common cloud services front end that for which the central application consumes those services from GreenLake, right? So you still manage this through GreenLake in terms of adding users to your account, adding the authentication. We support SSO with SAML, we support MFA and so forth, right? One of the things I want to highlight is in terms of the authorization. So the roles that we support. And so mainly we kept the same built-in roles. And so what you had in Classic pretty much still applies in New Central. The one thing that we have added in New Central is the concept of the scope group. So for a specific user, let's say it's an admin user or an operator type user, if you wanted to limit the types of sites they have access to, maybe you have an admin that's based in the US, but let's say you're a global company. You have an admin based in the US, you only want that admin to access the US-based sites. And you have another admin based in Europe, you want that admin to only cover the European sites, right? You can create scope groups for those sites, one for US and one for Europe, for example. And you only allow those admins to access those particular scope groups. That's what we've added in New Central. And that's really the one thing that I wanted to make you aware of is that scope support. And that scope support applies to both the configuration and also the MRT workflows. Okay. We've also allowed the role-based access control for the MSPs. For MSP type customers, normally an MSP, basically you'll have an MSP that themselves, they have access to all the different tenants, and the tenants are the individual customers that these MSPs manage. And maybe you want the MSP not to have full admin access into the tenants, right? They might just have a view access, whereas the individual tenants will have more of the admin rights, specifically for the customers in those tenants. So we support that for the MSP customers. One thing that's coming down the line is the ability to do custom roles. We've heard a lot of feedback that people want to modify what's in the built-in role and create some custom roles, and we're going to have that. That's coming soon. This is just a quick overview of the roles that we have. None of this has changed. So this was available in Classic. We kept the same types of roles in New Central, and this goes from the highest privilege to the lowest, as you see here. All right, so I won't spend too much time on that. And I think that's the slides I have. So I really wanted to spend more time on the demo. So let's kick off the demo. And let me switch over to this demo system. So I'm using this demo here. Just want to make sure the Zoom doesn't block me. Okay, so here we are. We are in the main. So when you log into Central, it actually defaults into New Central at this point. So you're basically seeing a global view. We call this the NOC dashboard, the network overview. And this gives you all the information from a global perspective, right? It shows you all your sites here. It shows you health of your clients and devices, shows you alerts and the insights, right? So you have to make sure all of your devices are mapped into a site, right? So there's two ways of doing that. One is you've done it already in Classic. So let me just go back to Classic to show you that original way, right? So if you go back to Classic, you might have already done this in your network, in your deployment. I'll go back out to right now I'm basically in the organization tab, right? This is where you set up your groups and your sites. As I mentioned before, groups are what was mandatory before to manage things in Central. All devices had to be part of a group. Sites were optional, but you can still create sites here to make sure you're ready for New Central, right? So if I click into the site tab, you get into this table, right? And it basically lists all the sites that you have, and the devices are on the right side. So right now I'm just showing all devices. They're all mapped. In this case, they have all been mapped into sites. None of them have been unassigned. As you see, there's a 0. And on the bottom of, if I can get to the bottom of this page, this is where you would add the site, right? So you would add a site. I know this is a manual process, but you can do it one by one here, or you can do a bulk upload. So bulk upload allows you to have a CSV file with all the site information. I actually downloaded that so you can see it real quick right here. This is what the CSV file looks like. You have your site name, you just list your sites here and their corresponding information in this table. Upload that CSV file here, and you're good to go in terms of adding sites. And once you added your sites, then you would have to map the devices into the site. So here we actually have an unmapped site. As I mentioned, we have this unmapped site to collect devices that were not mapped into a site yet. So we automatically place them into this unmapped site. Some of these devices have not been provisioned yet, so they're in an unprovisioned state, but 2 of them have. So like, let's look at this switch. This switch has been provisioned. If it's an unmapped site, we highly recommend that you map them to the appropriate site. And so in this case, in Classic, easy way to map them is to basically, drag and drop into the site, right? So if I wanted to place it into this Miami site, I would go ahead and do that and map it over to Miami, right? Same thing for the other device. You put them into the appropriate sites where they need to be. All right. Now, so that's on the Classic side. On the New Central side, there is a way to add sites, but the way I would actually highly recommend doing the mapping of devices on Classic. But there is a way to do add sites if you wanted to stay in New Central and add sites. There is a way to do that. If you go to the configuration and you go under sites, again, you see the list of sites and you can create your sites here, right here, right? So same thing, add your address and so forth. In New Central, we've added the map, location capabilities. So based on the address, you actually see the location of that site on a map view. So that's added in New Central. All right. Um, but I would say you can still do the same thing in Classic. And then you also have the CSV bulk upload feature in Classic, and you can map the devices in Classic. So you can do that all in Classic in terms of sites. All right. Next thing I wanted to talk about is floor plan migration. So let's go back to Classic, and you will see I just want to pick a site. So basically, floor plans are assigned specific sites and buildings in that site. So let's just pick a site. I'm in the mood to go to Europe, so let's go to Paris. I'm going to check out Paris, see what's going on there, and then we go to floor plan, right? So make sure all your floor plans are ready in place within each of your sites, right? So this is a sample floor plan of Paris, typical floor plan, office building, right? A floor in that building, and access points located within that floor, right? This is what we show in the floor plan in terms of classic, right? Let's go through what this looks like in New Central. So if you go back to New Central, again, I'm going to go back to that same site. So you see the one-to-one mapping. It's not listed here. So let me go here and let me just search for it. Paris. Here it is. Go to the Paris branch, right? And then you click on the map symbol to get to the floor plan, right? So you get to the floor plan, you get to this particular floor on that site. I'll double click on it and you see that same map that you saw in Classic with AP locations and better visualization here because now we have the coverage map, like the heat map. You can change the signal strength in terms of the threshold where you want that heat map to visualize, right? So there's a lot more information you can do here within New Central. And you also have the ability to see the clients that are connected to those access points, right? So that's the floor plan a little bit. Now, I wanted to show you a different system where I actually tested the floor plan migration. So the floor plan migration I mentioned is within the floor plan management tile. So what you need to do is actually go outside of the site. You got to go to this global menu and you got to go to this floor plan management tile, right? So this floor plan management tile takes you to uh, usually you would actually set wall types. If you wanted to define specific wall types as part of your floor plan, you can do that here. But this is also where we put that easy button. I actually did it already. I pressed that easy button, so it actually shows what I did. I tested it for two sites. So I tested it for, in this case, it was a university customer had some sample floor plans, and it was able to migrate the floor plans from these two buildings over to New Central. And I can just show you that real quick. If I go back to one of those buildings and look at the floor plan that it got migrated from Classic, it will show you this happens to be two floors in that building. It'll look like this. Notice that these APs are actually colored in white because I actually haven't assigned actual devices yet. So if you don't have the devices yet within the site, they will come up as planned access points, right? So once I map actual devices or actual access points into the site, then they will actually fill in these with green with the normal coverage maps and clients and so forth. But all I did was test the floor plan manager migration to show you this. All right. So that's how that works. That's where that easy button lives. Again, go back to the menu, floor plan management, and you get to the easy button. It will show migrate button right here. That's the easy button. All right, so let me go through a few more things. Before I get into alerts and reports, I've always got questions about, we talked about contextualizing around the sites, right? If you wanted to see what's going on in a particular site, you go to that site and you have the context of that site. You have the devices in that site. You have clients and so forth in that site, right? We have actually also added the global view in New Central. So the global view, this is the global knock dashboard, but if you want to see the global monitoring view, you would click on this, looks like a half sun type thing, this icon here. This takes you to the global networking monitoring view, right? So now in this global context, now you can see all your devices across all your sites in one unified device list here. So this is your global unified device list. This is your global unified client list. So these are the things you're used to in Classic Central. We have put that also in New Central because you're used to it. So this is the global unified client list, right? So that I just want to quickly show that. All right, so now let's go through the alerts again. I want to make that comparison between Classic and New Central in terms of alerts. So alerts you see here in New Central, but before I dig into this, let's go back to Classic. So if you go to Classic, remember where alerts are. So alerts are here under alerts and events. So if you click on alerts and events, you get into this page here, right? So and let me make sure I'm at the global. I just want to make sure I see everything from a global perspective. Okay. So I see all these alerts popping up, right? Like I said, it could range into the thousands of alerts. It's very hard to understand at this point from Classic Central what's the most important thing to tackle at this point in time, right? It's just kind of listed in the table view here. I know there is also a way to summarize it. You can summarize it by alert type and so forth. But it doesn't give you much kind of insight into what to tackle first. It doesn't have basically the guardrails and frameworks. The correlation to reduce that noise is not here in Classic. And the way we configured alerts, if you wanted to change the thresholds or the severity of alerts, you would go under this config button under the alerts. And again, it's grouped by device. You can see alerts for access points, alerts for switch and gateway, or alerts for like client connectivity. And if I just like, I'm just going to pick one as an example, 802.1x authentication delay detected. If I pick that alert, this is where you would actually create the customization. You can change the thresholds, the the levels of the thresholds and what constitutes as critical, major, and minor. You can change what sites they should be focusing on, right? So we did that on the top part of this, configuration for alerts, and the bottom part is where we actually set the basically notifications to other systems, whether you want the notification by email, by streaming API, or a webhook to, let's say, a SIM or some other monitor tool where you want to aggregate these alerts, right? So you had done this configuration at this point from this level here. Now let's go back to New Central, and this is where I want to kind of highlight what has changed, right? So if I go back to New Central, actually, let me go back to this case here, this here. New Central here, right? I'm going to go back to the alerts here, and you can see right now how we've done a better job. Instead of thousands of alerts, we're trying to correlate things and make sure you can see things easier. So we can actually categorize what's important. So here we're seeing a lot more client alerts. So this is probably where we need to spend more time on at this point for this system. We have system alerts, right? So we have done that level of kind of filtering out for you. And then within that, you can see the individual alerts here, right? And you can tackle them as you choose to. For example, if it's like a server timeout or DCP discover timeout that's happened 13 times, if I click on that, I can go back and try to dig into that alert real quick. And I just want to show you what that looks like. And I just want to quickly show you, like, it gives you the summary, the impact. And this is really the root cause analysis I really wanted to highlight, right? This is added in New Central that allows you to kind of give you guidance of what to look for and how to resolve this particular issue, right? Now, in terms of the configuration of alerts, it's not within here. It's actually, again, within this global menu tile. We've added the way to manage alerts here. So there's an alert management tile here. We click on this to manage, right? And this is, again, it's listed kind of in a table format here. You can search for specific alerts. But again, I showed you that 802.1x authentication delayed alert in Classic. And I want to show you what it looks like here. It'll be a little bit different in the sense that we've added other things to configuration beyond what you can do in Classic. So the thresholds stay the same. You can create your thresholds, and the thresholds for each right, critical, major, minor. You can set those thresholds the way you want to be. Right. That's the same as Classic. Identification is what type of alert it is. What's new is what I want to highlight is this triggering piece, right? So this is what the guardrails I'm talking about. You don't want this alert to pop up all the time. So we want to set certain conditions to when you want this alert to trigger. So in this case, only if the latency is greater than 200 milliseconds, then trigger this alert, right? And then you can set other types of triggers as well as you choose. But this gives you the guardrails to allow you to so that this does not kind of consume your alerts, right? Like create too much alert fatigue. All right. So that's for the alert configuration. The other thing is about the notification. So the notification, we actually broke that out a bit more. We broke it out into a separate tile to do the notifications. So we can do that here. Again, back under global, you'll notice that a lot of higher level functions that map across sites or at a global perspective are within the global menu. So alert managements are here, floor plan management is here, and notification rules, right? We go into notification rules, and this is where you actually set the notifications. I just want to show you one thing I've tested here. I'll just click on the edit. You can choose which sorts of alerts that you want to set the notification for. Obviously, you don't, maybe you want to be more specific and only pick a subset of these. And this is if the minimum info alert severity. Let's say I don't want just info. I want actually the minimum to be major to be notified. And then you go here to actually set the notifications. So you can either do by email or by webhooks. We give you those options. Streaming API is not done here on the UI. It's kind of done separately within our API framework. We'll talk about that later in terms of the API transition. So we cover the email and the webhooks within the UI in terms of alert configuration notifications. Alrighty. So that's alerts. Let me go somewhere. I'm going to take a few more minutes to do the demo. So I wanted to go through a report. So let's go through a report. So go back to the global dashboard, and I'm going to do the comparison again. Show you where things were in Classic, and then compare that to where things are in U Central. So if I go back to Classic Central, reports were here on the left side. If I click on reports, you can browse the reports that you created. You can manage the scheduling of the reports, and you can create reports, right? I'll focus on the creation of the reports. So the creation of the reports, we mapped it into these different categories. We have clients, infrastructure, network type reports, some of the insights here as well, and also security compliance, right? If you wanted to see what these reports do, what they output, you can do the preview, and you can see what the reports will look like when you generate that report, right? So we have done, so this is where you would create the reports using the pre-built templates, right? I would say we have done a better job of doing this in the New Central. So in New Central, we have gone here, again, go back to global menu, go back to reports, and you see how you would create reports here, right? These are the reports we already created, you would create here. So we have added a lot more predefined templates in New Central. Things around application analytics are pretty new. Uh, and some of the things have carried over, right? And then within the reports, we've actually even, I would say, added even more KPIs. So client session, we have session data by SSID, by different usage and so forth. I would say we've increased the number of KPIs within the report as well. So this is where you would have to, whatever report you had in Classic, you'd have to kind of re-enter them here in New Central, right? So this is the piece that we'll take some extra care, right? Make sure you have what you had in Classic, look at that, and then map it over here. But you just have to kind of go through that process in this way, right? Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the RBAC. So let's go to RBAC. So like I mentioned, RBAC is done through GreenLake. So I'm going to switch to GreenLake to kind of show you that. Let me go to the Manage Workspace. Bit crop rates, I mean, goes to GreenLake. Okay. It's taking me back to the workspace. Oh, took me too far out. I just want to get into the GreenLake workspace. Okay, here's a workspace. I wanted to show you all the user management capabilities. So this is where you would actually enter your users, right? You would add your users here. You can even add user groups here. Your roles and permissions are defined here. And again, these are the built-in roles that we currently have within the RBAC functionality. You're seeing double here because I have two instances of Central in this workspace. I have one production and one internal. But these are the roles we talked about before, from highest privilege to lowest, right? And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the scope group. So this is where you define, for every given role, you can define what level of scope, or in this case, sites that a user can have access to, both from a configuration point of view and an MRT point of view. So if I just want to create a site, a scope group, I'll just call it site admin, but I'm going to show you how it's basically defined to be allowing only specific sites, right? So I'm just going to create this scope group. Oh, no spaces. Go there. Create that site admin, then I'd add the scope. So in this case, we would keep it within the central service. We're running on US West region, and then I click on the sites. I've seen this happen where it disappears on me. Okay, do it again. Central, West, resource type. So here's where you can define, you can even define it by groups, but I'm going to define it by sites. And let's say I had those two levels of admin, right? One in the US, one in Europe. Let's say I'm working on the one for the Europe admin. I only want that Europe admin to access Paris and London, for example, right? And you'd add that scope. And that's where you would define the scope group. And this gets consumed by central. So if you assign this to specific admin, this scope group, they can only access the London and Paris sites, right? I just wanted to show where that's done. Okay, let's go back to central. And I think I have, just let me take a few more minutes because I think I'll do a little bit more demo so you can see where things are compared to Classic Central. One of the things I wanted to compare was the AI insights as well. So if I go back to Classic Central, I will show you where the insights were. So the insights were done at a global level. And if you go to the overview section, you see this tab for what we called AI insights. So the AI insights were here. And you can see we had a set of insights that we had capable for Classic Central. Here it's bubbled up to 17 different insights, and it's across access points. It's either connectivity or switches and so forth. But it was a limited amount. This is where we've actually increased the number of insights in New Central. So if I go to New Central, you will see insights right immediately on the NOC dashboard. It's a separate card here called the insights, and I can expand that. And we've added a lot more insights. So if you look at this, it's actually more than double what we bubbled up here compared to Classic. And if I just want to focus on the wireless insights, we've added things like coverage hole optimizer, power save, and things like that, right? So these are the things that have been, I would say, quite valuable in terms of insights. These are proactive network optimization type insights that you can go through. For example, if I look at the coverage hole optimizer, kind of gives you an idea of what you need to do to improve the coverage, to address these coverage holes. So if I look in the floor plan, it basically tells you I would need to add a couple more access points here to address those coverage hole gaps, right? I'm just quickly showing these things to show you where the changes are compared from Classic to New Central. And the other things I want to highlight, I would say we have added a lot more in terms of the application experience. So performance analytics, KPIs on application performance. This is something we didn't have in Classic Central, right? So you can go through this. The next thing I wanted to show is on the client insights. People want to know the classification. And so on the Classic side, if you go to clients, you would see the client list here. We added this client's profile to give you the classification. And then you would see the profile of the devices. You could see it in a graphical view here, right? So that's how it was done in Classic. In New Central, it's different. So you will see, again, you can go to the global view so I can see all the clients. I'll click on the clients from a global perspective, and you can see the normal client list. You can change that to a classification type client list here. But I like to see what's more the graphical way of seeing this. So the visualization, when you go to the graphical, you go to this summary tab here, you can get to the graphical type of view of your client classification. So you can see it's located here now in New Central by vendor, by models, and even by where they are within your network. And we have some of these IoT type measurements where you can see how much download and upload is created by your devices. All right. The other thing I've always getting questions is how do you do troubleshooting in New Central? And so I wanted to cover that for a little bit. So troubleshooting is always done within a site context. So you don't go to the global view. When you do troubleshooting, you actually have to go within a site. So I'll pick this Miami site just as an example. And when you go into a site, the site context is in the center, like the sun. And within the sun, you'll see this troubleshooting tool icon here. You click on that, and this is how you get to all the troubleshooting tools that you can use within this site, right? So I can run some tests if I wanted to run an access point test. These are the types of network tests I can do besides ping, HTTP, and so forth. I can actually remote console if you choose to from Central into the device. You can set that up here. You don't have to have a separate, console terminal or anything to get in. You can go through the UI. You can initiate commands. If you don't remote console, you can actually initiate the commands directly from here, the CLI commands. You can do that here. We've added the live monitoring recently. So this allows you to do the packet capture. Right now, it's just supported on the switch. We'll soon allow that for the other devices as well. And then we have support logs for our support team and the history of what's been done within the troubleshooting tools. Okay, that's on troubleshooting. One more thing to help with troubleshooting, I like to show. Let me get out of this. Move back to the NOC dashboard, and I want to show you the audit trail. People always ask, where do I find the audit trail? So you can find the audit trail back in the global menu. You click on audit trail. This is for the last many increases to the last 7 days, for example. And you can see the types of things that it's actually logging in. The troubleshooting, configuration type changes, system changes, and so forth are all can be done or all can be looked at here for any type of troubleshooting type use cases. Okay. I think I've covered a lot in the demo. And so I wanted to have a little time for Frank to cover one slide on the API. Then we wanted to share some resources with you as well, and then we can take some Q&A live at the end of this session. So let me go back to the slide. And Frank, I'll hand it off to you to talk about this one here.
All right, thanks, Mark. APIs. We have redone the API interfaces, endpoints in New Central, and there's a bunch of benefits that we have implemented in New Central. The rate limits are considerably higher, in some cases 1,000 times higher in terms of the number of APIs that can be called. The interfaces are much more consistent in terms of attribute naming is all consistent between all the APIs. So what that does mean, though, is that the APIs, any automations that are written in terms of the classic APIs will need to be have their calls changed to the New Central APIs. And there is a mapping document that we have, a mapping website that we have, which shows, given a classic API endpoint, which New Central API endpoint to use instead. And so the first step is to take a look at that, identify which classic API endpoints need to be changed, used in your existing applications, and to locate the new central versions of that. We have interfaces for testing the new APIs on our developer hub. We're using Postman. And then obviously the harder work of updating your application automations, your automation applications with the new central APIs to start making use of these new capabilities and higher throughputs. We also have support for all the streaming APIs that we had in Classic. And in addition, from a webhook perspective, we also support webhooks. In Classic, we supported webhooks on a number of alerts on us. And in New Central, we support webhooks on all alerts. And also the webhook content is also been made more consistent with each other. Again, naming attributes, standard features. I'm just touching on the basics of the new APIs in New Central. We also have improved debugging workflows in New Central APIs, so the experience should be much improved. We also support OAuth 2.0 for New Central APIs. So a lot of changes, although it does require implementing, looking at the new endpoints in New Central and re-implementing your calls in terms of those. That's all I have on APIs. Back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. And I just wanted to flash where that mapping is living in. It's in our documentation for Central Online Help. You go to automation, and we do have a page just specifically on this API reference mapping. So this gives you the side-by-side comparison between the classic Central API and the new Central API, and how the endpoints have actually changed between the two, as you can see, right? So just a quick reference there. All right, let's go. And we can almost ending the presentation. We'll take some Q&A at the end. We'll actually share the links to these documentation in terms of sites, floor plans. What I covered basically in this presentation, we have it fully documented in the central documentation. So these are links to the documentation, and in addition to the alerts, reports, and RBAC that I covered as well. All right, so these will be takeaways for you. I think they'll be shared within the Q&A or the chat, and we'll actually share this after the session as well, this documentation links. All right, I think we've reached the end. We have about 5 minutes to cover Q&A. So let's see. Is there anything that we should talk about live that's kind of a hot topic within the Q&A?
I
Within
am
the Q&A that's
scanning.
entered? Yeah.
There are a lot of questions about configuration, which is
Yep.
obviously a big point of the migration, a big point in terms of migrating from Classic to New Central. This webinar was intended just to cover the issues with respect to monitoring, reporting, and troubleshooting, which does not require migration of your configurations. You can do all your monitoring, reporting, and troubleshooting in New Central and leave the configurations in Classic Central. The migration of configurations over to New Central is something that will be addressed in the coming months, likely in another webinar, although we haven't set a date for that yet. And that migration is a separate brings up a separate set of issues and topics. We've tried to answer some of those in general in the Q&A, but the details we will leave for a future webinar.
Sounds good. Thanks, Frank. Is there anything else that we want to highlight from the questions? I'm assuming we've answered most of them in the Q&A chat. So
Yeah, and I think anything that hasn't been answered or that maybe is more related to configuration, obviously, is something that'll be answered in our next webinar. All right. Well, with that, I do just want to let everybody know that we will be sending out an email to anybody who was here for the webinar or who couldn't make the webinar with all of the resources that were mentioned. I'm also pasting them in the webinar chat, but it's the links don't paste, so it's a little bit bulky right now, but you will get those when we send over the recording. And I did just want to say, if we can go to the next slide, I
Okay.
believe that's where we have
Yep.
the survey linked. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we just wanted to ask that you could please fill out the post-webinar survey. It is linked here in that QR code. We'll also be sending an email that will contain the regular link. Because your feedback is incredibly valuable to us, and it will help us shape our future webinars and give us feedback on how today's session was as well. We'd love to hear what topics matter most to you and what you'd like to see more of, so we can continue building content that supports what you're actually looking for. And again, the email will be sent out as soon as we have the recording completed and all of the resources. And we'll take a look and see if there were any questions that maybe weren't answered. And I just wanted to say thank you again for your all of the presenters. Thank you for your time, Mark and Frank, and everybody who was able to attend. Thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.